Good. So everyone, as I said, I'm really excited to have you on board, Ian, because yeah, as I said, I've been really like following your work, and in fact, we've been showing your work here at the school for a really long time. Just in case anyone is new to this format, my name is Holger. I'm the founder of London Institute of Photography, and I'm going to pass this on to you now, Ian. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much for having me on. Thank you very much for being here, you guys, and coming to listen to me from the corner of my studio. This is where the magic happens, so they say. And I don't know, I think I'll just jump right into it. I don't really have anything more to add to any introduction. I think you've done a good enough job as it is. So this presentation I have given a few times, and I think that for anybody who hasn't seen this or doesn't know who I am or the work that I do and fundamentally why it is that I do it, I think this is a good insight into all of that, into my working practice. And like, I have done this a few times. I did think that I would change the title of this presentation over time. I feel differently about how it is now than how it was, but the philosophy still holds some weight. And although I am not a wedding photographer is the same, it's come to mean something different. And it came about at first as a separation from an industry that I didn't particularly like, and an industry that didn't particularly like what I was doing. And I wasn't a fan of the beautiful styled images and the endless talk of gear and cameras and lenses and how it should be done and how it shouldn't be done. So there's always somebody telling you that's how it should be done. And that's a tough thing when you're trying to find your own way. And if you guys are just starting out, it's the information available is just, there's an endless amount. And I can't imagine how difficult it is to find the right information. And even when I started 20 years ago, I spent 3, 4, 5 years running around in circles, taking on board everything that people said, and I became a little bit unfulfilled, you know. But anyway, so I am not a wedding photographer now. I suppose it's more about not having a label. I'm just a photographer, really, or an artist, if you like. I don't really find it too pretentious to say so, but I've had exhibitions in art galleries, and I have books and done artist talks, and so yeah, it's more about not having a label. So everyone has a perception of what a wedding photographer is. It's all they really know photography. So you tell somebody that you're a photographer and the response is like, do you photograph weddings? And it's like, yeah, I do, but I'm not really a wedding photographer. And I suppose at the time it was a little bit of embarrassment because wedding photography was perceived as bottom rung photography job. And it's where a lot of people start out, and you get interested in photography, you've got a camera, and somebody asks you if, well, can you photograph my wedding? And at the time, somebody's going to pay you £250, and you're like, I'm going to be rich, £250 to shoot a wedding, until you realise that that's not very much at all. But there's always requirements from the industry, and there's requirements from the couples that you shoot for, and there's requirements for your own promotion. You have to be able to hit that target over and over and over again. And once you get into a situation where you're doing these beautiful mountaintop portraits and you're showing them and you have them on your website, people are going to expect that. And I know wedding photographers that get stuck in this loop of making work so they can sell themselves, but then not being able to do anything else because that's what people want. And for me, there's not much room for exploration there. And I'm not saying it's wrong. It's my kind of me defining my understanding of the situation. And so by my own real understanding, I'm not a wedding photographer, but I have a great admiration for photographers who can constantly keep up with the pace of that, can constantly keep up with the changing trends. And in that sense, it's a commercial photography gig. And yeah, as I mentioned, when we only have when we have to fit things into these parameters, we have to fit what we're doing into these parameters. It was hard for me to kind of express myself doing that. But hey, I suppose at the time I didn't really know how to express myself with photography. I didn't really understand the medium and the possibilities of the medium at the time. So, oh, there we go. And again, with any kind of industry, commercial industry, it's like people think that I'm shooting in a style, or I like the style that you shoot in, or you're a documentary wedding photographer, or you're this, or you're that. And people are like, I like your marketing, that I am not a wedding photographer. And none of it was like meant to be like, that was never the case. It was never a plan to go, I'm going to shoot in this style. Or it was never a plan to say, I am not a wedding photographer. These things just came about by me trying to express what it is that I'm doing. So what I do is, these photographs are nothing but a consequence of my process. So all the work that I put into it, these just come out the other end, and I'm not considering the market, and I'm not considering what other photographers think about it. I'm considering kind of how it feels to me and how it's a representation of my relationship to the subject, I think. So with everything that I shoot, it doesn't really have anything to do with the subject itself. I'm shooting my relationship to that. And it's a bit of an abstract expressionist approach to photography. So the route into doing this is unique to me, and it's not a formula that I learned from workshops or the industry, and it didn't come from industry or client expectation. There's been a constant development of an idea, and I haven't tried to read the market or develop a sales technique, you know. And I'm not running a wedding photography business. And some talks that I do, people always ask about the business, how to book more clients, and how do I get these pictures past them, and are they ever upset? And no, because they're hiring me because of what I do, and people who hire me understand photography. I would like to think that they understand photography. So the aesthetic isn't my goal, and really selling my work isn't the goal. What I do is kind of way less straightforward than that, and that's the misunderstood part, I think. And how I came to this is the tough part. Like how I came to like doing this and like finding out who I was. That's the part that makes these pictures what they are, not the f-stop and not the lenses and not the cameras. It's the idea, and it's the process. So the photographers, I feel, especially wedding photographers, fall foul of making meaningful work because there's no real idea behind what they're doing, apart from chasing an aesthetic goal to commercialize that, to then make money from that. So we all, I suppose, imitate in the beginning, but we have to then study and learn enough so we don't have to. We can find our own way. But my own process is derived from imitation, you know, so like we all have to start somewhere. So there has been a bit of kind of a symbiotic relationship with myself and photography for quite some time now, and both have helped the other progress. I think to get some insight into this, we can go back and we have to understand me, which is something that I didn't understand until I started to study photography. And it's kind of a bizarre thing that understanding photography, well, I'm saying I didn't at the beginning. Photography was a commercial endeavor when I started, when I thought I would look cool being a photographer, you know, and how hard can it be, really? And it wasn't until 4 or 5 years that I really started to understand what photography was and the possibilities of photography. And that changed the way that I saw the world around me. And in turn, that changed me for the better. And I believe that I've had 2 completely different lives. There was one before photography and another one once I started to understand the world around me, or look at the world around me. So kind of historians will always say that you need to understand 2 other times to understand this time. It gives you a kind of a perspective and an understanding of changing times. So here's a time. is me. I was 3 years old here. I was the youngest of 4 brothers. And my parents split up when I was very young, and I was put into care. We were all put into care. So this image of me, this first picture of me, was, I think this was my first night that I was put into care. So there's me again. I didn't like peas, so I was given a little pea pusher to try and get me interested in peas. I like peas now. I'll eat them now. That's totally fine, you know. And like, I'm adding these pictures to kind of illustrate the fact that this looked like just a normal life, and like how all photographs are propaganda somewhat, because like really on the inside, I was like really confused and didn't really know what was going on. So this is kind of me at the back, a little bit older, and like things, I was really confused at the time, and obviously a teenager and not really understanding myself or what was happening, and I became a little bit unmanageable, and I didn't really feel like I had any options as I was coming to the end of my kind of to the end of school. Not that I was there that often, to be fair. So the army was somewhat romanticized to me, and when I left school, I kind of felt like it was my only choice. So like into the army I went. That's what I thought it was going to be like, but really, to be fair, that's more what it was like. T-shirts and whatever you call them, combat trousers, and just lots of running around and nothing really going on. I mean, I did some cool stuff when I was in the army. I got all my driving licenses, which boded well when I got out of the army, because I picked a job as a truck driver. And, you know, I think the thing is, I didn't really understand what it was or what I was doing, other than I didn't have another option. So I spent about 3 years in the army, and thought that it came to the point where I might get shot at, or like I might have to shoot somebody. So and I wasn't really down with that kind of thing. So a couple of years in the army, then I got out of the army, did a few other jobs as like milkman and a window cleaner, and kind of worked on the roads and truck driving, and really it was anything that I could do just so I could earn money to kind of party all weekend. And like, that's all I really knew how to do well. So look at that. Where am I? I don't know if I can't remember where I'm at on there. But yeah,
it's so similar. It's difficult to spot you.
Is this me down at the front? Second from the right, maybe.
Oh yeah,
that might be me, or it might be another one. Who knows? But yeah, I mean, it kind of felt proud at the time, you know. But I like inside again, it was just something else. I didn't really feel like I wanted to be there. So I got out of the army, and then I spent a good couple of years messing around and partying and, you know, doing what you do. Like, I kind of joined the army at 16, and it wasn't until like I was nearly 20 when I got out of the army. So I missed out on all that kind of partying, and but yeah, it was just, I had no direction. So I was just earning money and going out on a weekend, earning money and doing things just because. So, but we had a laugh. It was a bit fun, and I don't know. I suppose it just got to a point where I was a little bit like, what am I going to do? I need to do something with my life, you know? And I'd always been interested in photography and kind of art and things like that. It was kind of a difficult thing to do. That's a shock. It was a difficult thing to do and be, especially with the people that I choose to spend my time with. So I decided I was going to be a photographer, and there was a studio at the time called Venture. It did all this kind of white background, kind of awful photography, but it was successful, and photography was a commercial endeavor. I wanted to do it to look cool. I wanted to do it so I could make some money, and this was the kind of thing that was being churned out at the time 20 years ago. So I tried to replicate that a little bit, but I spent about 5 years doing that kind of stuff, and it drove me around the bend. I wasn't really learning anything, and I wasn't actually being a photographer. So I thought I would go to college and understand and learn kind of more about what it is that I was supposed to be doing. But to be fair, I just spent more time. I was partying all the time, and like I was in a bit of a band. It was just, there was always house parties afterwards, and we were always just like, you know, it was like it was a fun time, you know, and I learned a lot about I suppose music, photography itself, because understanding what it takes to be a good photographer, a musician, helped me to understand what it meant to be a good photographer. It wasn't like, as far as photography was concerned, it was like, where's the magic button? You know, that's like, and people still want that. People still want to understand and kind of figure out where the magic button is. And they always ask me, like, when people ask about your apertures and people, well, what would aperture do you use for street photography? Or it doesn't, it's completely irrelevant. But what I did come to understand, that it was study and it was practice, and that would make me a better photographer. So I kind of dismissed a lot of, I suppose, what do we call documentary photography at the time, because photography to me was, it was the portrait, it was the sunset, it was the architecture, it was the car, all of these things that were just a commercial endeavor. And after a while, I went back to photography with more of an understanding of kind of what it is that a photograph was. And people like Diane Arbus and Martin Parr and William Klein, these photographers really helped me to understand the possibilities of photography. And that didn't just change my perspective of the world around me, as I said earlier, that fundamentally changed me as a human being. And this completely changed everything that I was doing. And yeah, like, it was, what do you call it? What do you call it? What's the word I'm looking for? Profound. It was a profound, yeah, it was a profound change. So when you don't really know what you're supposed to be doing, and you're kind of fresh and you don't have much of an idea of photography, the prominent aspect is the industry itself. And this is where we get all our information from, and kind of, they'll always turn your eye with shiny new gear, and like, this new camera will make you a better photographer, or this new lens will make you a better photographer. And I came to the understanding that, like, no piece of equipment will ever make up for a lazy attitude towards photography, you know. And we have to kind of understand what photography is and where it came from. And as I said, Diane Arbus, that picture before, this photograph, a Martin Parr photograph, like, I didn't get Martin Parr at all. It was like, there was obvious use of flash. You can't have obvious use of flash. You know, it seemed at the start a little bit messy, but what it was commentary. And when we start to think of it as, you know, part of the role of photography is to exaggerate, and that's an aspect that I have to puncture. And he did that, as he says, by showing the world as I really find it. It wasn't how somebody else finds it. It wasn't how an industry told him to find it. It was how he really found it, and how he could use photography to represent, I suppose, just the absurdity of life. And this kind of thing really resonated with me at the time. So there was also the idea of, where did photography come from? Like, I always had an interest in photography, in music history and the bands, and like, who influenced who, and like, who was part of what, and who developed these techniques. So once I became really serious about photography, I started to look into the history of photography. And to be fair, like, it is a very short history compared to the history of art. History of art goes back thousands of years, like to cave paintings. The history of photography goes back nearly 200, you know, but in its development and the ideas and how it's integrated into the history of art, that became interesting to me. So if we look back at Daniel Barrow, who in the 16th century kind of wrote about, there's my dog barking, and hear him, who wrote about this contraption called the camera obscura that helps people to trace images from the outside. And I'm sure you all know what a camera obscura is. But this had an effect on art itself. And when this is a portable camera obscura, and so you're running around the streets with this doing street portraits. So people could now, they were mobile with it. It didn't have to be a big room, and they could trace things, and it created perspective in art. And if we look at Jan van Eyck, James Andolfini and his wife, this was art that it was lens-based art. And this realness and this perspective started to come about in art. So it changed how people drew. And the cool thing about this is, if we can see the mirror in the background, it has the reflection of the art at the back of them and the art. And it has like Jan van Eyck's ear or something like that. It's like, do you know, that tagging that he did? He'd always put a little thing in these pictures, which was cool. And then obviously we look at Vermeer, Girl with a Pearl Earring. And once we started to see these tonal ranges and the gradients and the shading that aren't visible by the human eye, it is because it was lens-based, and that's how a lens sees. And the girl in the red hat, I don't know whether you can see it, but again, with the light and the fall off and the way that that looks, and the chair post at the front is out of focus. So we can see how people started to see. And then we come down to in the 1720s, Johann Schultz, who was a scientist, found out that silver nitrate would darken in a jar on the light side. He started to develop light sensitive materials. And then through experimentation and kind of people wanting to make images that weren't drawn by the hand of man. This is just a whistle-stop tour of what's going on with photography history, by the way. We could spend all day and have a full 2-year program based around its development and its understanding. But then in the 1820s, which 100 years later, we have this. Does anybody know what this is? Can anybody stick a message in? You know what it is.
Yeah. How about the others? Anyone? Yes and no. That's the first photograph, no, taken from the, like, onto the, how do you say, like from his window?
Yeah,
right.
rooftops.
Yeah.
So that was the first photograph ever made in the 1820s. So it was the first that wasn't drawn by the hand of man. So Daguerre, that was and Niepce, and he formed a partnership with Louis Daguerre, the Daguerreotype, and there, I think there were lots of other like 19th century processes, but these were the main ones that we kind of know of. And well, the first one that we really know of is this, which is the Daguerreotype, which is very much like your Polaroid. You could make one. And that was it. And this is the first photograph, known photograph of a human. And that human is down there on the left-hand side having his shoe shined. And because of the length of the exposure, people are moving around. We don't get that. I just think it's a really cool illustration. It's like, hang on a minute, it's like, this is the 1830s, just before the process was announced. And we've got, like, this is the very first picture of a human being. And I'm always really interested in the fact that before this, there weren't photographs. There were only paintings. And then there were photographs. I mean, how bizarre. Imagine a time that there were no photographs. We can't imagine that because we've grown up around them. It's been part of our lives since we were young. There he is. There's the guy in the photograph. So just pressing on a little bit with photography history, and quickly around the development. So we have Louis Daguerre, handsome chap. We have Niepce. Niepce dies before the process is completed. And then in 1839, Louis Daguerre announces to the French Academy of Arts the Daguerreotype, and then this is the start of photography as we know it. But we also, on the other side of the pond, have William Henry Fox Talbot, who developed, I think, what we understand as the first kind of photography, replicatable photography. So you make one exposure and we can make multiple prints from that. But obviously there's always a trade-off. This wasn't as sharp, but it was easier to make more prints. So it was going on. So these are the first photographs ever made. seemingly unremarkable, but from these very first photographs that were ever made, nothing has changed. The technology might have changed, but it's still a box with a hole in it. You control how much light's coming in and for how long. And like, this is why we can use any box with a hole in it to shoot anything. And people get so bogged down in, we have to use this and we have to use that and it has to be done, but no. And then the other thing that hasn't changed at all is light. So since the inception of photography, it is all essentially still the same. Nothing's changed. So then we look at Chuck Close in 1999-ish, made these daguerreotypes for, I'm sure I've got some notes here. I can't remember the name of the magazine, W magazine or something like that. But he said he used this process, not because it was an antiquated process and like he wanted to bring it back. It's just the fact that his understanding of photography was that since the inception of photography, it hadn't got any better. You know, these are the sharpest, most detailed pictures that have ever been made by a camera, and we still can't make them any better than that now, which is quite a feat. So then we have this, which is 35mm film, which was used at the time to test your ISO, to test the ASA on movie sets, because you couldn't have hundreds and hundreds of people on set and then get the exposure wrong. So they used these and this thing called the monograph to test the exposures of the film that we were using. So the moving pictures were around. This chap, Oscar Barnack, flipped it on its side. And then we have the first, in the early 1900s, Leica camera. You know, this is the first 35mm camera, which I think is pretty cool. But then we look at ideas. So we've got a camera, we've got something that creates process, creates these images, and then we've got an overview of the medium from its conception to its sort of a present state. And if we look at this picture by Mary Ellen Mark and how this communal wafer can be depicted as pure light, that's quite a profound and symbolic idea. You know? So how did we get from this was the thing that I tried to understand, and what I picked apart around photography history is, how do we get from this rooftop to this? And in the study of that and the understanding of that, I not only found myself, I also found my place within photography. And then you have Richard Avedon, who's a middle-class white guy who photographs William Caspi, who was born into slavery. And he's saying his portraits are more about him than they are about the people that he photographed. There's a lot to unpick there and a lot to try and understand. And Bruce Gilden, as shocking as his work may seem, he says he's photographing himself. It's his take on the world. He's photographing himself mentally. And the astonishing thing about Bruce is his images have always been shocking. People have always recoiled a little bit from them. And he's still doing the same thing 50 years later with new kinds of images. Like, man, he's a great inspiration as far as like, we have to continue to explore, we have to continue to make new work.
It's really interesting, Ian, what you're saying really about, you know, that's what I mentioned at the very beginning, to kind of really draw the line between what could have been described maybe at the very beginning, a very descriptive, you know, approach to photography. So people ultimately thought that a photograph is not a form of an artistic expression, it's more a craft, yeah, and that it's also a truthful representation of the world around us. Yeah, that's how photography was actually seen at the very beginning.
Yeah,
it's really obviously like nowadays we are probably like a bit smarter. Or I mean, obviously there are different schools of thought, but that we really start to realize that ultimately, by taking a photograph, this is a series of subjective choices made by the photographer. Where do you place the camera? When you press the shutter release button? What's your angle of view? What's the the whole context basically.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
that it's actually ultimately it's a subjective expression, yeah, and that ultimately really, you know, it's really interesting what you said about Martin Parr, who said that ultimately photography is a huge lie,
yeah,
and instinctively a lot of people actually had the opposite opinion. They thought like, okay, hang on, you know, I know that this is true because I've seen the picture, so it
yeah,
must be
yeah,
true. And what he said at one point is, no, this is not true. I mean, basically, this is just what I choose to show you. Yeah.
yeah.
So this is all a big lie. This is all my expression. It's really interesting, like how you shape this, I think.
Yeah, 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 definitely. I mean, absolutely. It's kind of, but I didn't understand that at the start, man. Like, and even people who were interested in photography don't really understand that. When I used to teach, we would have 30 people who would come in for the year program, and we'd lose half of them within 3 weeks. Because once you started telling them there was no magic button and you have to work hard, then it's like, oh, right, well, I'm not really down with this, you know. My mum said she liked my pictures, and like I thought that was all it was, kind of thing, you know. But I mean, yeah, it's so like I kind of had this knowledge and understanding that I was kind of building, and I started getting requests to shoot weddings, and I thought, well, I want to go and work on some projects, and I want to go and work on I want to start documenting the world around me, but I can't do that if I don't have any money, and I can't do that if I've got another job. So I gave in to requests from weddings to be able to do that, and I think that I did it in the way that it's expected for a short amount of time, until I started like applying my ideas to wedding photography, and I suppose to go against the grain and to try and do something else with it. It became a challenge, and it became a project in itself. And I've been very lucky that I've found people who are happy for me to come and do this for them. They're happy to come and for me to come and create what I believe is a document of our time through weddings.
Yeah, and it's also like, I mean, obviously your, how can I say that? So the as you mentioned at the beginning, you know, a wedding is obviously like is a you say it, you know, it's a celebration. It follows a certain ritus, basically. You know, it's like a, you know, it follows like certain structures. There are certain ways things are supposed to be, certain ways people are supposed to behave, certain ways people are supposed to dress up, let's say, yeah. And obviously everything seems to follow a type of choreography. And obviously reality looks very different, right? So, you know, it's supposed to be the happiest day of people's lives, but well, you know, for a lot of people, I mean, people have nervous breakdowns literally like during their wedding, yeah. So you know what I mean. So what's obviously like really so outstanding in your work is that you have the guts, if I can say that, really to take an event like this, yeah, and you literally like turn it the other way around, yeah, and you actually show basically like a side of the medal that you want to see. Obviously, you know, again, so we can't say, okay, this is really how a wedding is. Yeah, this is your expression of a wedding. Could I ask, Ian, was this like a gradual, let's say like a gradual development? Did you kind of start in wedding photography more in the, let's say, like the traditional way? Then at one point you decide, oh, hang on, all my, let's say, like B-side shots, yeah, like all the ones that are actually not supposed to be like published, yeah, they're actually the more interesting ones? Or did you jump right into the cold water and just say like, okay, guys, I'm going to do this completely differently?
I started shooting it in a way that was expected to be done, and the way that I thought people wanted it done. But as I was shooting, and as you say, this kind of B-side, I already had these ideas of what documentary photography was, or like social documentary. And I started to, I suppose, see things and make photographs of that. And when I was coming back and going through the edit, these were the pictures that were standing out for me. It wasn't the kind of the fancy one with all the flash and the beautiful portrait and all of that kind of thing. Not that I was ever very good at that, to be fair. I just felt drawn more towards this. And so like the idea was, if I can continue to shoot weddings, but do it in the way that I want to do it, so I can make money to work on other projects, then that would be a great thing to do. So it started maybe over, I couldn't even say it, but it was gradual but quick. And then I just started showing people, I started posting this kind of photography about weddings, and I used to get a lot of stick from the industry, like, well, you can't shoot weddings like that, you can't shoot, the bride doesn't want to look like that, and people want to look nice on the wedding day. Not everybody wants to look, not everybody cares that much. Some people are interested in the reality, and a lot of people that I shoot for are like, they're interested in photography as well, and they understand the importance of good photography.
Yeah,
I mean, like, some of these pictures, I mean, I can go back 15 years into my weddings and find different pictures. A lot of wedding photographers will just be finding a variant of the same picture they've always taken. And I'm always looking for something new. And the more weddings that I photographed, the more I saw it as adding to a body of work, rather than shooting individual weddings where I had to craft it specifically in a way so I could then sell the next wedding, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. And it must be directly linked to the, let's say, like to the open-mindedness and the media savviness, I guess, of your clients. Yeah, because I mean, I could imagine, let's say, like images like yours, probably 90% of the, let's say, like average wedding couples, they would just say like, what is going on? I mean, why on earth? That's exactly like the images that we don't want to have. Yeah, so just by your very particular style, already weeding out, I guess, like 90% of the market. And the ones that are left over are probably, I could imagine, for example, like quite media savvy, media aware, maybe have maybe an understanding for photography. Can you describe the average wedding client? Yeah, and just want to say, Katerina, we've seen your question. I'm going to pass it on to Ian just in a second.
I think that I think they want the reality. They're not interested in the fairy tale. There you go. I think that's it. But a lot of them are kind of creatives, like everything from actors, musicians, copywriters, graphic designers, that kind of person, or people who do have doctors. Always seem to have an interest in photography. And do you know, I think it's people who just appreciate the fact that they're going to get a document of their day that's individual to them. Although that it's this way of shooting, the things that I find on a day are unique to the couple that I shoot for. So I'm not presenting the same set of images to every person that I shoot for. And I think that certainly has an appeal.
Yeah, and if I could pass on Katerina's question to you, she asks, do you have an assistant? And if so, how do you retain your signature style working with another person?
Right, so the first question, no, I don't. I work alone, and it would be impossible to get somebody to shoot in the same way that I do. They don't have the same life experience as me. They don't have they don't have the exact same understanding of what it is that I'm trying to do. And if I can go back to what I said earlier, the fact that these pictures are just the consequence of my process and my study. And it's not a style. So to get somebody to kind of try and copy that, it's nigh on impossible. And although that I may enjoy the pictures that they make, and they may make some good photographs, I don't think working with somebody else in this environment for this project would really be of any benefit to anybody.
Super. I think that also answered Katerina's question. Okay, back to you, Ian.
Okay, so I mean, it's hard to work in this way as well, because I'm really just putting it out on the line and saying, like, this is me, this is the work that I do, and like I see myself in this work. It's like I haven't just made a nice picture for somebody. This is an expression of kind of who I am and the way that I see the world, and I have an underlying cynicism that goes into everything that I do. A healthy cynicism, not an unhealthy cynicism. But people take umbrage to it. Other wedding photographers take umbrage to it. And there was a photographer online who just couldn't get it. He just couldn't understand why anybody would want this. And he couldn't understand it because he wouldn't want it. And he didn't understand that not everybody thinks the same way as you, kind of thing. And if I'll read out this feedback that he sent me, he went out of his way and sent me this feedback, and I'll show you the pictures that he relates to. So, your photos are less true photojournalism and more of an ugly distortion of the moments on someone's most important day of their life. They are exposed so poorly with such noise that the detail of the bride's dress is being lost. And I think we can all agree that brides enjoy seeing dress depicted in beauty. And this is the pictures that he's on about. It's like, it's bizarre. But what about their families as well? Are using your use of the 18mm has captured a woman in a portrait that is not just unflattering, but has distorted her face in a grotesque image. My flash technique, or lack of, has rendered the underwear of some of the venue staff visible. Carrying one camera and one body to a wedding. I've never said that I carry one camera and one body to a wedding. It's not professional. Frankly, if I was the client, I would have sued for emotional damage. And it's not simply a case of I don't like it. I see bad photos every day and have not spare a moment for them. It is the fact that this work is actually being awarded by questionable authority, the ridiculous place of one of the top wedding photographers in the world, and yet your work reeks of laziness, indiscipline, and although contrarians may see some merit in it, there is in fact no originality whatsoever. This really is yet another pretentious display of low-mo idleness. I made that mistake on purpose, you wouldn't get it kind of photography, that repulsive, unrefined garbage that echoes across the halls of mediocrity in all forms of art.
Oh my God, this is fantastic, Ian. I can't believe this, really.
I couldn't have asked for higher praise.
Amazing. You should really show this like on your webpage. I mean, this is, because ultimately, it's just the biggest praise that you can get, right?
Absolutely,
Amazing.
absolutely. But it was even like it didn't mean much, but it meant even less when I saw his work. So if anybody gives you feedback, go and have a look at their work and see who's giving you that feedback. But yeah, so again with weddings, like wedding photographers call themselves storytellers, and like the things with weddings, the story's already there. It's kind of our interpretation of that we need to focus on. And take this picture for example. The bride wants a group shot on these stairs, and my photographer brain is going, the light outside is amazing. In here, it's terrible. I'm shooting at like 6400 higher ISO, wide open. And I'm like, well, I won't, my thing is just to go with it, not to force anything and like try and make it mine. It's like, that's where they want to do it. That's where they'll do it. As they're getting ready, one of the staff walks along with this tray of canapes and they all dig into it. So if I'd have tried to force the situation, I wouldn't have come out with this shot. And this is one of my favorite wedding photographs that I've made.
Yeah.
So controlling the situation really seems to be the opposite of what I should be doing. Let the wedding be the wedding for me. That's the way that I like to work. And if you change the way you look at things, then the things that you look at change. So to learn about photography helped me to look at weddings differently because I was looking at myself differently, and that helped me look at them from a photography perspective rather than a wedding perspective.
Yeah, I guess in the end it's all about the clash between expectations and reality. Like what we said at the very beginning. Like,
absolutely, man, expectations.
That's right. So people see in their minds, they see a wedding like in a specific way, and very often our expectation of how reality looks like is like a cliche. Very often it's got nothing to do with reality, really.
Yeah.
And this kind of clash between how things actually look like and how we imagine things would naturally unfold themselves, this kind of clash between these two parts, that's what it is about, I guess. Yeah, amazing.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And as my man Martin says, he always starts with a cliche, you know, and then he takes it from there. So this is Martin Parr. I'm lying in bed one morning, I get an email saying that, like, the header was something along the lines of, I was speaking at a photography conference, didn't realize it was mostly wedding photographers, and somebody said that I should have a look at your work. Usually what comes after that is, what camera do you use? Do you use assistants? Blah, blah, blah. So I just didn't really read the rest of it. Came back to it later on, read the rest of it. You're doing some nice work. We should meet, Martin Parr. I'm like, what the I'll not swear, but I did a lot, loudly, and screamed a little bit, because Martin was a photographer that helped me to understand what photography was, you know, and in doing that, changed me as a human being. So, like, years later, to get a message from Martin saying that he liked my work and I should pop into the Martin Parr Foundation in Bristol, I was like, what? Like, it was a million miles away from anything that kind of I could have expected. And a couple of weeks later, I get a call from Jason Barron at BBC Pictures, saying that Martin directs the idents, and we're doing some in Newcastle, and he's recommended that you come along and shoot the behind the scenes. So within a couple of weeks, on set with Martin Parr, shooting some behind the scenes work, and totally fish out of water. This is like, you know, but the odd thing is we ended up having an exhibition of the work at the Martin Parr Foundation. He offered me a show, and, like, for me, this was, from what we understand, the first exhibition of wedding photography in a fine art context anywhere in the world, and a solo show. And then we've got Peter Mitchell sitting down here, the guy at the left there, just happily snapping away, David Hearn. You know, it's just anybody shooting the event, yeah, just David Hearn. It's like, I'm like, all of these giants of photography are all here to kind of see my work, and they all like it. So all of the crap that I've been through, it didn't really, like, although that it didn't matter that much, it mattered even less. It was like, this is the validation. And although that, like, awards come and you get added to lists and all the stuff that goes with, like, being noticed, that was never by design, and that didn't matter. To get Martin to recognize the work, he said, just do what you want, let's have a party. So we've got a DJ and a cake and everything. But to have, that's the greatest compliment I could have asked for as far as my work was concerned. And we did a first dance as well, which was all very nice. But yeah, I mean, so as I said, wedding photography was a way for me to make money so I could work on other projects. So I'll just quickly show you through a couple of the other projects that I do work on, and longer term ones. This is a series called Down the Club. I spent a year going into a working men's club to photograph what was going on, everything from the karaoke to the pigeon racing to the rock and roll nights, and, you know, the bingo, the turn that's on in the bar, the kind of all of this kind of stuff. And it's sort of, I thought it was dead in the water when we came around to lockdown, but a publisher contacted me and wants to make a book of the work as part of a series looking at underrepresented aspects of community. So it's about getting started for personal projects. Like, I never knew where it was going to go. I had an interest. I grew up around working men's clubs, and they're all going away. There was a local one. I thought, I just need to get in, and the camera is a passport to get into anything you want to shoot, anything you want to do. You know, as long as you have like a pure intent and you want to give something back as well, don't just go and take. So it's, yeah. And then another aspect of society, I'm kind of interested in community, really. And another community that I'm interested in is bodybuilding culture. So having a camera allowed me to go into bodybuilding competitions, and this is a project that I'll be picking up again this year, with the British Federation of Bodybuilding to go in and kind of document what's going on this year. Maybe it'll last longer. I suppose it depends what I get from it. But again, these projects are just born out of interest. It's like, this is a working men's club in Gateshead, and they've got plastic all over the walls to stop all the bodybuilders' tan getting on all the walls, and they have stuff all over the carpets. And like, it's such a bizarre world, but a great community, you know. So these, for me, there's no real, I have no commercial idea about this. I'm shooting this to create documents of our time, a historical document, really. And I kind of just doing what I've done, I ended up, again, through getting to know Jason at BBC Pictures, a photographer that they use for behind the scenes and on set, couldn't make it one day. He phoned me up, he said, do you want to come down and do the on-set stuff for BBC Three's This Country? Which, if you haven't seen it, go and see it, it's hilarious. So this isn't a great job, by the way. It's not very glamorous. You're on set, nobody wants you there, you're always in the way, you always have to move. There's a DOP, there's a director, there's a second, first assistant director, second assistant director, there's makeup, everybody gets in there before you do. And before you know it, the lights are coming down and they're changing location. So you've got to be on your toes all day, and you may get 10 to 15 seconds if you're lucky. But what you get from it is kind of worth it, you know. And especially, I mean, you see your pictures on BBC iPlayer on the, like, when you turn on your TV, it's kind of, all right, there's one of my pictures, which is nice. But yeah, it's a tough gig, but it's kind of worth it. So, I mean, other longer term projects that I work on are festivals, British festivals. Again, you can't get if you just go and pay, you just don't get the access. You can't get into where you want to be. Somebody's going to ask you what you're up to if you walk around the camera. I just contact the organisers. I like a festival. I get free camping. I get a pass to be wherever I want, whenever I want to be there. And nobody really asks you any questions. And in doing so, what I'm now doing is building up this archive of photographs of. It's not necessarily the bands, although I do now and again get pictures of the bands, and I can get into the pit. But like, I'm not interested in that. I'm interested in the people. I'm interested in what's kind of going on at the wedding, at the festival. Somebody there who's not really enjoying himself. But even within the context of a festival, there are also other things that I'm looking for, like dogs at festivals. I have a whole series of dogs at festivals. What I'll do with them, I don't know. Maybe in 10 years' time, I'll have enough good ones to make a book or have an exhibition. Who doesn't like a dog in sunglasses? You know? I have an evil empire to protect, but still like cute dog ears. You know? And it is just kind of looking for the ridiculous. This was another BBC thing that we got onto. It was I think it was an iPlayer promo, but just to get in and meet people like Gus Kahn, who's a funny guy, and watch him get dressed up like an old man. And then we have actors from Peaky Blinders, and these are all good gigs. And then what happens is, because the work gets so much, especially the wedding work, when we had the big exhibition, it gets so much exposure, then it gets in front of the eyes of art directors and agencies. And this was a job that I shot for Hampton by Hilton's. So we went and documented one of their hotels for the weekend. And obviously we had researchers to find out who was going to be there, and trying to get into these groups. But these guys, the Morris dancers, they were just there, and we asked them if we could take the pictures, and we got them to get all dressed up with the bells on their feet and come down to breakfast and photograph it, you know, which was cool. And Hamptons used these pictures for I can't remember what the campaign was called, like something like Real Travel, to show that not every hotel trip had to be a holiday. You know, it's like their hotels were used for people just doing stuff. And the next one was this was a commercial job for Huawei, the mobile phone people. They didn't use this one, obviously, this photo with a broken iPhone, although I thought it was a good representation of like their phones might be better or something, but I don't know. So the reason this came, well, when this came about, I was like, oh, like commercial gigs, and like, hey, there was a lot of money involved, I can't lie. But there was also the point of, do you know what? I'm going to do it. I'm going to shoot a wedding on a mobile phone to prove that it doesn't really matter what you shoot it with. Because if you have an idea of what you're doing and you have a process, then the pictures will come out the same. And although we could pixel peep and get right into them and go, oh, well, the whites are blown out here and it doesn't have the range of a digital SLR, it doesn't really matter, you know? The pictures are the pictures. Oh, I've gone back to the beginning. So I kind of got a lot of stick for this as well, especially from photographers who were, I think that they hold, their professionalism comes from the expensive gear that they use, rather than their process and their understanding of photography. So when somebody comes along with a mobile phone that costs a fraction of their huge cameras and lenses and does a job that, I don't know, is it better, is it different, something that they don't like, then they're going to kind of jump on that and they aren't going to be happy with it. It's like an invasion of their space, so to speak. Yeah. But hey, man, like you can shoot a wedding with anything. Then COVID came. Like, what do we do? Like,
sorry, if I could quickly throw in a question from Rebecca. She asked, do you ask for permission to share pictures of people online? Wondering whether if you're doing a personal project and not commissioned, and perhaps showing the reality, what they might consider unflattering. Do they ever get any do you ever get any objecting?
I've had, because everybody is in on it, they know what they're doing. I never share anything before they get their pictures. I don't like go, oh, here's 20 pictures from a wedding and the couple haven't seen them yet. They're in on it. I never try to exploit. I never try to make anybody look or have them in any kind of compromising positions or try to make them look bad. And no, I think once a groom contacted me and said his auntie wasn't happy with a picture. But then he said, it's up to you whether you want to take it down because we hired you and I understand the whole game. But in that case, I just take it down and I don't use it. I've got enough that I don't have to go, well, I have to stand my ground and it's my picture and it's my intellectual property and if I want to use it, I will. I'm not going to upset people, but it doesn't happen simply because they see the pictures beforehand. I do shoot weddings where there is a caveat that they will, I'll give them a selection of what I would like to use for future, whether it's exhibition or publication or even just a post. And especially when I have like actors, and there's a couple that I'm shooting that are in the security business that they just don't want their pictures all over the place, which is fair enough. So like there's never a problem, but I think it's the couples that hire me will kind of say beforehand, we really love what you do, we really want it, but there may be some people there that we can't show pictures of and can't use, and is it okay if we like kind of veto any pictures? So that's how I work around it. In that way of doing it, there's never really been any kind of bad experiences around that. I hope that answers the question.
Yeah, absolutely.
So then COVID came. The thing is, like going into COVID, that was like that year leading into that with the exhibition, the boot, the commercial work. It was like I became a 15-year overnight success. So I felt like I was banging my head against a brick wall for 14 years. And then all of a sudden, I just broke through and it happened. And then COVID came, which was, I had to mourn the loss of that. But it was like, what do I do during COVID? I'm not shooting weddings, but like I had this idea to go and shoot these big American cars. Like when I was a kid, there was a guy down the street had two like outside of his house, and they just looked ridiculous. So I just thought it would be nice to go around and contact a local kind of classic car club, American car club, and see if I could go along and take pictures. And people are always like happy for you to do so. And this guy, you couldn't really park it outside of his house. Can't get it into a parking space. It was too noisy. This is his neighbour who put her head out wondering what we were doing as we took the picture. He's in his socks and his like sliders, and it's just utterly ridiculous. But hey, everybody's utterly ridiculous. I found that shooting all of this kind of stuff has helped me realise that like I'm not the only crazy person. Everybody's a bit crazy in their own way. I got to get out to Sicily to shoot and it wasn't an engagement, it was an anniversary. But again, it was kind of interesting that we were all, everybody's masked up most of the time until the drink started. I don't know whether you can see the top of your screen. In between them, there's a fly. Oh, yeah. Yeah, that was the first time the fly made an appearance. There's the second time it made an appearance. And then the inevitable happens. If there's a pool around, you know, that's the bride in the pool. But it's just kind of, you know, like during lockdown, these are kind of the images that I made, and like, what was I going to do? And like, I ended up going out to Turkey for a couple of days to photograph these drag shows, because there's a drag queen lives around the corner from me that I did some portraits of for the Face magazine, lockdown portraits they were doing a series of. And when we got talking, it was kind of like, can I come and do some stuff around Newcastle and shoot that scene, just because I was interested and the camera can get me in, as I keep saying. It didn't happen. He ended up going to Turkey. So I went out and shot their kind of final shows over there, which was cool, and hopefully the start of another project. The cast of Shrek. And then there was other things. There was kind of bodybuilders, female bodybuilders that I'd worked on, and then you kind of go and photograph them at home when you can. And like I got to go up to the North Coast 500 on my motorcycle to ride around. So these are just kind of pictures that I made, and I'm hoping that this will turn into a longer term documentary project around the North Coast. I'm going to go back again this year. And it's just these people, like these two used to go to Ibiza every year. They couldn't because of COVID, but still wearing their Ibiza clothes just beside a lock in Scotland, you know. So this was kind of laying the groundwork for that, for that thing. And obviously when I go back and spend a bit more time in certain places, and obviously I have a big interest in motorcycles, and through talking to a friend, I got into shooting some flat track racing, which is cool. And again, it's just another community, man. It's like people from all walks of life, all coming together. And these kind of races, this number 37 is Leah Takalov, and she's like 5 foot tall. And she's racing these big Indian FTR 1200s with these big guys and beating most of them, nearly all of the time, which I find cool. Oh, is that going to come through? That didn't. But, you know, it's kind of like when I didn't know what I was doing, I was always looking for answers, and there was always those who claimed to have them. And it's not about the answers, it's about the discovery. And it's, as I said before, it's like study until you know enough to make your own decisions, and don't just be a producer of ideas rather than a consumer of ideas, you know. Just be interested in photography first and apply your understanding of what that is to the things that you shoot.
So and the movie sets photograph, like the last one, the person lying on the floor.
Yeah.
This one.
That's a wedding.
It's from a wedding. Okay.
Yeah.
Amazing.
That's from a wedding. That's at the top of a very tall flight of stairs in Durham Castle. Yeah. But the way that I see it is this: it's not so much to see what nobody has yet seen as to think what nobody has yet thought concerning that which everybody sees. and that's from the German philosopher Arthur Schopenhauer. I think that kind of that wraps it up quite nicely, I think.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Ian, really. We've got a question here from Peter, who asks, are any of your pictures posed or are they all spontaneous?
All of the wedding stuff is spontaneous. It's as it's happening. Obviously the on-set stuff, now and again, it's going to be paused, but as much as, like, yeah, I do, all of these pictures that you've seen are spontaneous images, but we have to kind of plan to be spontaneous, so to speak, you know? So I understand in my mind what it is that I'm kind of going for and my reason for being there, and these are the pictures that come out of that. I do shoot the odd portrait if the bride and groom want it. I do group shots if people want group shots. It's like, I'm there all day. I'm a photographer. It's not my speciality, but I will do it if I'm there. And I understand that people at weddings, some people still have this expectation. Parents and aunties and uncles might want pictures together and things like that. So yeah, these pictures aren't, but it's not that I don't do that at all.
I see. Good. So everybody, thanks for staying with us. I mean, that was such an amazing talk, really, Ian. So funny. I mean, just your humor, the way you see things, and it's always, I mean, I personally always find it absolutely spectacular if you are allowed to grasp a bit of the sense, yeah, of the awareness process of the photographer, or the way, or the, yeah, just the way how the photographer ultimately got there. That's the really interesting stuff. Yeah. So thank you so much, really, for sharing that with us. So now everybody is the final opportunity to ask any questions, because I know you need to dash off really soon.
Yeah, I mean, I've got.
Yeah, you've got literally like 5 minutes, basically.
5 minutes, 10 minutes. Yeah.
Okay, yeah. Rebecca asked a question: if you were to commission a photographer to photograph yourself on events, who would it be? That's a really nice question. So if
I was getting married,
get married, yeah, or maybe if you're married, or as I have already said, you know, after seeing your images, yeah, you can think about getting remarried again, yeah, just to work with a specific photographer. Who would it be?
I mean, obviously there are people like William Eggleston and Martin Parr, and like, imagine Nan Golden shooting your wedding, you know? If it could be anybody, then that would be tough. There is a photographer called Monica Munoz, who is a wedding photographer, but she works on her personal projects, and her work is like as good as anything I've ever seen. But like, her and her husband are just wild, and they have a wedding video and photography business called the Richters, like the Richter scale, the Richters. They're cool, but I wouldn't like them to do it the way that they do it like that. I would like her to shoot it in the way that she shoots her own kind of personal projects. But oh man, an infinite amount. If it could be anybody, it would be like loads of them. Yeah.
Good. Okay, thank you so much, everybody. So thanks for staying with us. Thank you so much for your really absolutely amazing talk, which I enjoyed really very, very tremendously. Good. Thank you, everybody. Ian, the group, and join us again for the next one. As I mentioned at the very beginning, we're currently trying out different times of the day, different days of the week, just to find a slightly different format. So stay tuned, everybody. If you want to make sure you're going to find out about the next talk, then sign up to our newsletter, which you can find on our webpage. Thank you so much, everybody. Yes.
Also, if anybody wants to, just drop me an email. If you have any questions, find me on Instagram, Ian J. Weldon. Yeah, just like, if you have any questions, just let me know.
Super. Where you can ask Ian everything about aperture and ISO he uses and the focal length. Yeah. Okay. Thank you so much, Ian. Big high five from us. Thank you so much. Bye, everyone.
Cheers.
Cheers.